A rainy alley. A broke cashier swings a mop handle and saves a fragile old man. By morning, she learns the truth. He's the father of the city's most feared kingpin, and now every enemy wants the girl who saw his face. She's rushed to a glass tower, the door locks, and the rules are simple. Stay quiet, stay close, stay alive. But the danger isn't just outside. Someone sold her name. A friendly nurse smiles too perfectly. A cheap landlord knows too much. The crime lord's son shields her with bullets and ice-cold orders, yet watches her like she's the first warm thing in years. A storm hits, a trap snaps, and the girl must choose: run from his world or step into it and become the reason he kills a war before it starts. If saving a stranger made her a target, will loving a monster make her untouchable, or the easiest way to break him forever? The rain drums against the window pane of Isabel's tiny studio, its rhythm matching her still racing heartbeat. She shifts on the worn couch, her damp uniform clinging uncomfortably to her skin. The events of the evening play on repeat in her mind like a stuck record. The old man's face, lined with fear, the gleam of metal as the robbers pressed him against the wall. Her own voice, surprisingly steady despite her trembling hands. The weight of the mop handle, solid and reassuring in her grip. A siren wails in the distance, casting dancing red and blue shadows through her blinds. Isabel pulls her grandmother's afghan tighter around her shoulders, unable to shake the chill that has nothing to do with her wet clothes. The studio feels smaller than usual tonight, the walls pressing in with unfamiliar shadows. She should change, should eat something more substantial than the half-eaten granola bar in her pocket, but exhaustion pins her to the couch. The leather watch with its intricate crest flashes in her memory. Such a beautiful piece, definitely worth more than she'd make in a year at the grocery store. The old man's courtly manners, even in crisis, spoke of old money and influence. Isabel's gaze drifts to the stack of unpaid bills on her coffee table. The electric company's final notice glares back at her, red letters stark against white paper. Her throat tightens. The overtime she'd picked up this week might cover it, but then there's rent, and her ancient car needs new brake pads. A car door slams outside, startling her from her worried calculations. Through the gap in her blinds, she catches a glimpse of a black SUV idling across the street, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlight. Something about it makes her skin prickle, but she's too tired to investigate. The couch cushions embrace her as she sinks deeper, her body heavy with the aftermath of adrenaline. The rain continues its steady percussion, and memories of the evening blur together. The old man's signet ring catching the light, the metallic taste of fear in her mouth, the ambulance's antiseptic interior. Her phone buzzes. On the coffee table, probably Marcus from work, checking if she's okay after triggering the alarm. She should answer, but her eyelids are too heavy. The phone buzzes again, insistent, then falls silent. In the corner, her uniform from tomorrow hangs on the back of a chair, a reminder that in less than 7 hours, she'll need to be back behind that register, scanning groceries and making change. The thought alone makes her muscles ache. A police car cruises past, its lights painting her ceiling in alternating crimson and cobalt. Isabel watches the colors dance, remembering how the old man's hand had trembled when he'd gripped her arm in thanks. She hadn't thought twice about stepping in. Something in her had simply refused to watch someone vulnerable be hurt. Her tiny kitchen holds nothing but ramen noodles and half a loaf of bread, but hunger feels distant now. The sound of rain grows louder, drowning out the city noise beyond her windows. Her worn uniform shirt still smells of the grocery store's industrial cleaner, mingled now with hospital disinfectant. The locksmith's neon sign below her window flickers to life, bathing her room in an intermittent golden glow. Usually the buzz of the sign irritates her, but tonight it feels almost comforting, a familiar anchor in an evening that had spun so far from normal. Her eyes drift to the mending basket beside the couch. Full of clothes she patches and repatches to avoid replacing. The same instinct that drives her to squeeze every penny until it screams had made her keep that mop handle instead of throwing it away. "Waste not, want not," her grandmother's voice echoes in her head. Thunder rumbles in the distance, and Isabel burrows deeper into the Afghan's familiar warmth. The couch's springs dig into her hip, but she's too tired to make the 5 steps to her bed. Besides, from here she can watch the rain trail down her window, each drop catching the light like liquid silver. Her phone screen glows briefly, showing the time, 1:47 a.m. The hospital's business card sits beside it, bent slightly from being in her pocket. She should have asked for the old man's name at least. But he'd been barely conscious by the time they'd reached the emergency room, and she'd felt awkward hovering once the professionals took over. A cat yowls somewhere in the alley below, its cry almost human in its mournfulness. Isabel's eyes grow heavier as the rain's rhythm slows to a gentle patter. The flash of police lights continues its lazy dance across her ceiling, but it's softer now, almost hypnotic. Her last conscious thought is of the old man's watch, how the crest had seemed to shimmer in the alley's dim light, like something from another world entirely. A world of wealth and power she'd only glimpsed through the grocery store windows, counting out change for customers who spent more on wine than she made in a month. The sound of another car door closing barely registers as she drifts off, the Afghan sliding from her shoulders. Outside, the black SUV remains, its engine purring quietly in the rain-washed night. But Isabel sleeps on, oblivious to the eyes watching her window, her wet uniform slowly drying in the warm darkness of her tiny sanctuary above the locksmith shop. Sunlight pierced through Isabel's blinds, making her wince as she peeled herself off the couch. Her uniform had dried stiff and uncomfortable during the night, and her neck protested from sleeping at an odd angle. The digital clock on her microwave blinked 7:13 a.m. At least she hadn't overslept. Her phone buzzed, displaying an unfamiliar number. Isabel hesitated before answering, her voice still rough with sleep. "Miss Hart, this is Nurse Chen from Metropolitan General." The woman's tone was professionally warm. "The gentleman you helped last night. He's asking about some personal items that might have been left in the alley." Isabel's eyes fell on her work tote, slumped by the door where she'd dropped it. "Yes, I have them. I picked everything up when the ambulance came. Would you be able to bring them in? He's quite concerned about his ring and watch." After a quick shower and change into clean clothes, Isabel dug through her tote. The signet ring gleamed, despite the alley grime, its velvet box scratched but intact. The watch was heavy in her palm, its face unmarred despite the scuffle. Both items probably cost more than she made in a year. The bus ride to the hospital took 40 minutes, every stop and start making her clutch her bag tighter. She'd wrapped the items in a clean handkerchief, tucked into an inner pocket where they pressed against her side like a secret. Metropolitan General's lobby smelled of antiseptic and coffee. Nurse Chen, identified by her badge, led Isabel through corridors that grew progressively quieter and more private. They stopped at a corner room with a view of the city. The old man sat propped against pillows, looking far more composed than the night before. His silver hair was neatly combed, and though his face bore evidence of rough handling, his eyes were alert and warm. "My guardian angel arrives," he said, his voice carrying traces of an Italian accent. "Please, come in. I'm Arturo." Isabel approached the bed, noting how even in a hospital gown he maintained an air of dignity. "I brought your things." She carefully unwrapped the handkerchief. Arturo's eyes crinkled as he smiled. "Ah, perfect timing. I was just telling my son about your heroics with that mop handle. Very resourceful." Isabel blinked, seeing no one else in the room. Before she could comment, Arturo reached for the items with hands that trembled slightly. "The ring was my father's," he explained, sliding it back onto his finger. "And this watch, a gift from my late wife. Their value isn't in the metals or stones." "I'm just glad you're okay," Isabel said, meaning it. "Those men, they could have really hurt you." Instead, they got a surprise from a brave young woman. He studied her face. "You must be hungry. Hospital breakfast isn't Michelin-starred, but it's hot. Please let me thank you properly." "Oh no, I couldn't." "Indulge an old man's wishes." His expression turned gently persuasive. "And you must let me pay for a taxi home. These buses, they take forever." Before Isabel could protest further, Nurse Chen returned with a breakfast tray and a white envelope. The smell of coffee and warm pastries made her stomach growl traitorously. As she ate, Arturo asked casual questions about her life, listening with genuine interest to her abbreviated answers about her jobs and tiny apartment. He had a way of making conversation feel easy, natural, though she noticed he shared little about himself beyond general observations about the weather and the hospital's peculiar way of scrambling eggs. It wasn't until she was preparing to leave that she noticed the changes in the hallway. Two men in expensive suits stood near the nurse's station, their broad shoulders and watchful postures suggesting more than casual visitors. They spoke quietly with Nurse Chen, who gestured toward the room while checking something on her tablet. But it was the third man who caught and held Isabel's attention. He stood apart from the others, near the window at the hall's end. Tall and impeccably dressed in charcoal gray, he radiated the kind of authority that altered the air around him. When their eyes met, his gaze cut through her like a blade. Dark, assessing, dangerous. Isabel looked away first, her heart stuttering. "The envelope," Arturo reminded her gently. For the taxi. And thank you again, my dear. You're proof that angels still walk among us. Isabel mumbled a goodbye, clutching the envelope as she hurried past the suited men. She could feel eyes following her all the way to the elevator, but she didn't look back. The taxi ride home was quick compared to her usual bus route, but Isabel couldn't relax. Every black car seemed to be following her. Every suited man on the sidewalk made her pulse jump. Her apartment felt smaller than usual, the windows too exposed. She drew the blinds before changing for her afternoon job, trying to shake off the lingering unease. The short-term rental properties she cleaned were all in the same upscale building, their gleaming surfaces and designer furnishings a stark contrast to her own worn belongings. As she worked, Isabel's mind kept returning to the hospital room, to Arturo's gentle manner and the mysterious men in the hallway. The ring and watch felt significant now in a way that went beyond their obvious value. She promised herself she'd return to the hospital that evening during visiting hours, maybe catch Arturo alone and ask the questions she'd been too startled to voice earlier. But as she scrubbed and dusted, that hallway scene kept replaying. The suited men's quiet conference, Nurse Chen's tablet, and most of all that third man's penetrating stare, like he'd been, cataloging every detail of her face, measuring her worth with those dark eyes that had seen too much. Dusk painted the city in burnished copper as Isabel hurried through the hospital's side entrance. The ring and watch, carefully wrapped in a clean dish towel, weighed heavy in her pocket. Her steps echoed through the emptying corridors as visiting hours drew to a close. She just wanted to return Arturo's belongings and extract herself from whatever complicated situation she'd stumbled into. The memory of those suited men and their suspicious glances made her skin prickle. The corridor to Arturo's room stretched long and dim ahead. Before she could reach it, a figure emerged from an alcove like a shadow-given form. Isabel's breath caught as she recognized the man from that morning, tall, devastating in a perfectly tailored black suit radiating controlled danger. "Miss Hart?" His voice was lethal velvet, smooth and sharp all at once. "I believe we need to talk." Two suited men materialized behind him, blocking any retreat. "Security," one announced, though their bearing suggested far more dangerous credentials. "I'm Leon Vescari." He studied her with dark eyes that missed nothing. "Arturo is my father, and you've placed yourself in quite a situation." The name should have meant something to her, but Isabel's world was paychecks and bus schedules, not whatever realm this man inhabited. Still, the way he said it, like the name itself was a weapon, made her pulse skip. "Those men weren't simple thieves," Leon continued, stepping closer. "They were hunting Vescari blood, and now anyone connected becomes a target." His gaze pinned her. "So tell me, who sent you? What's the going rate for staging a rescue these days?" Heat flooded Isabel's cheeks. "Staging? I was walking home from work. I saw someone who needed help." "No one helps my family for free." His words cut like ice. "Everyone wants something." Something snapped inside her. Isabel yanked the wrapped items from her pocket and hurled them at his chest. "I want nothing. I'm broke. I work 2 jobs, and I did what any decent person would do. Ask your father. He'll tell you I'm honest." Her voice cracked on the last word, anger and hurt tangling in her throat. Leon caught the bundle with fluid grace, but before he could respond, movement flickered at the stairwell door. A figure in scrubs burst through, and Isabel barely registered the wrongness of the surgical mask before Leon moved. His speed was terrifying, inhuman. One moment he stood before her, the next she was crushed against the wall, his body shielding hers as a crack split the air. The smell of gunpowder mixed with his cologne, spice and cedar and danger. Behind them, his security team moved with brutal efficiency. The masked attacker went down hard, weapons skittering across the floor. Sirens began to wail through the hospital's corridors. Leon's grip on her arms was bruising as he pulled back, just enough to assess her. "Are you hurt?" Isabel shook her head, too stunned to speak. Her entire world had narrowed to the rapid beat of her heart and the solid wall of his chest. "Sir," one of the suited men called, "we need to move, now." "Get my father out through the service entrance," Leon ordered. "Take separate vehicles. Marco, bring her with us." "What? No, I can't." Isabel's protest cut off as Leon's hand wrapped around her upper arm. "You're involved now," he said grimly. "That means you come with me until we sort this out." She tried to dig in her heels, but he moved with inexorable purpose toward the back exit. The evening air hit her face as the door swung open, revealing a sleek black SUV idling in the shadows. "In," Leon commanded, practically lifting her into the back seat. He followed, his presence filling the confined space as Marco slid behind the wheel. Tires squealed against asphalt as they pulled away from the hospital. Through the tinted windows, Isabel watched the city's lights blur past, each one taking her further from her simple, manageable life. The ring and watch sat between them on the leather seat, still wrapped in her cheap dish towel. Such ordinary things to have caused such chaos. Leon's phone buzzed, and he answered with clipped words in what sounded like Italian. Isabel pressed herself against the door, trying to process the last 10 minutes. She'd walked into that hospital, planning to return some jewelry and walk away. Now she was in a strange car with dangerous men, running from someone who'd tried to kill them. Her uniform still smelled like cleaning products from her afternoon job. The evening shift at the grocery store would start without her. Bills were due next week. These mundane concerns felt absurd against the backdrop of gunfire and squealing tires, yet they grounded her. Leon ended his call and turned that penetrating gaze on her. In the dim light, his eyes were almost black, his features carved from shadow and control. The dish towel crackled as his fingers closed around it. "My father speaks highly of you," he said finally. "Claims you're exactly what you appear to be, a good Samaritan in the wrong place at the wrong time." "I told you," Isabel managed, proud that her voice barely shook. "I'm just a person who helped someone in trouble." "There's no such thing as just anything in my world, Miss Hart." The city's lights played across his face. "And now you're in my world whether you like it or not." The SUV glided through shadowy industrial streets, its headlights cutting through patches of fog rolling in from the river. Isabel sat rigidly between two guards who might as well have been carved from marble. Their shoulders boxed her in, a subtle reminder that this wasn't a courtesy ride. "Your apartment building is being watched," Leon said from the front seat, his voice filling the silence. "You'll stay where I can ensure your safety." Isabel's throat tightened. "For how long?" He didn't answer, and that silence told her everything. The car turned onto a private drive, approaching a towering glass and steel building that pierced the night sky. Underground parking swallowed them, and Isabel found herself hustled into a private elevator. Her worn sneakers squeaked against polished marble as they emerged into a penthouse that probably cost more than she'd earned in 3 lifetimes. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city's glittering sprawl and the dark ribbon of river below. The space breathed luxury, all clean lines, subtle lighting, and furniture that looked too expensive to touch. A medical setup hummed from down the hall, where she glimpsed Arturo being settled into a suite by private nurses. "You're shivering," Leon observed, his eyes tracking water droplets from her rain-soaked clothes to the imported hardwood. Before she could protest, a woman materialized with a stack of soft clothing and a gentle but firm grip on Isabel's arm. She was steered to a spare room larger than her entire apartment, all cream and silver, with its own wall of windows and an ensuite bathroom gleaming with marble. "Change," Leon ordered from the doorway. "You'll catch pneumonia, and I don't need that complication." Isabel clutched the clothes, anger flaring. "I can't stay here. I have work tomorrow, bills to pay, rent due." "Your shifts are covered." He pulled out his phone, fingers moving across the screen. "Check your account." Her phone pinged. The amount that appeared made her stomach drop. 3 months' rent, transferred instantly. I don't want your money," she said. But her voice wavered as she thought of her nearly empty kitchen, the overdue electric bill. Something flickered in Leon's expression as his gaze swept over her thrift store sweater, the holes in her sneakers she'd patched with duct tape. For a heartbeat, she glimpsed something almost gentle in his eyes. Then it vanished, replaced by steel. "It's not charity," he said flatly. "It's payment for compliance. The men who came for my father won't hesitate to use you against us. Until they're dealt with, you're under my protection." The word protection felt more like custody. Isabel watched him leave, the door clicking shut with quiet finality. Later, wearing borrowed silk pajamas that felt like a costume, she padded to the kitchen for water. Voices drifted from Leon's study, a door left barely ajar, spilling amber light across the hallway. "Resnick's testing more than borders," Leon was saying, his voice tight with controlled fury. "The courier we caught had photos. He knew exactly when my father would be vulnerable." "And the girl?" another man asked. "The timing is suspicious." "I had her vetted. 2 jobs, barely making rent, no connections to any families or Anton's organization. But her presence in that alley was convenient." "Convenient enough to be useful," the other man noted. "If Resnick learns about her..." "He'd have leverage." Leon's voice hardened. "A good Samaritan, Proof that the Vescaries can still be touched by ordinary lives. He'd use her to crack our armor. Isabel backed away, her water forgotten. The names meant nothing to her, but the implications sent chills down her spine. She retreated to her room, sinking onto the edge of the bed that felt too soft, too foreign. Through the wall, she could hear the steady beep of Arturo's heart monitor, a rhythm that should have been comforting but only emphasized how far she'd strayed from normal life. Traffic hummed far below, the sound muffled by expensive glass and distance. She hugged her knees, watching lights twinkle across the river. Yesterday, her biggest worry had been stretching groceries until payday. Now she was caught in the undertow of something dark and dangerous, a world where simple kindness could be weaponized. The borrowed pajamas whispered against her skin as she shifted. Even they felt like a trap. Soft, seductive comfort masking the cage she'd stumbled into. Her phone sat on the nightstand, showing the obscene amount of money now in her account. 3 months of breathing room, but at what cost? In the hallway, footsteps passed her door, guards changing rotation, she guessed. The penthouse hummed with subtle security. Cameras in the elevator, men in the lobby, others surely watching from places she couldn't see. Protection, Leon had called it. But as Isabel listened to the city's distant pulse and Arturo's mechanical heartbeat, she wondered if there was any difference between being protected and being imprisoned. The line seemed as blurry as the river fog creeping past her window, carrying the weight of choices that were never really choices at all. The morning light painted steel shadows across the penthouse as Isabel followed her assigned guard to Arturo's suite. The sitting room gleamed with old money, leather-bound books, Persian rugs, and silver picture frames holding memories she wasn't meant to see. Arturo sat propped against embroidered pillows, his face brightening. "Ah, my rescuer returns." "She's here to rest, not entertain," Leon interjected from the doorway, arms crossed. "Nonsense!" Arturo waved his good hand dismissively. "The nurse needs to change these bandages, and I need distraction. There's a book on that shelf, my dear. The blue one with gold lettering." Isabel retrieved it, running her fingers over the worn spine. "Master and Commander? Patrick O'Brien, nothing better than sea adventures to make hospital visits bearable." Arturo winced as the nurse began unwrapping his ribs. "Read to me." Leon's jaw tightened, but Isabel was already settling into the wing-back chair. Her voice gained confidence as she read about tall ships and naval strategy, pausing only when Arturo requested his morning espresso. 3 sugars, he instructed with a conspiratorial wink. "My son thinks it's terrible for my health, but what's life without sweetness?" Isabel prepared the coffee, exactly as requested, earning a delighted smile that crinkled his eyes. The nurse finished her work and left them to their impromptu book club. "Tell me," Arturo said during a natural pause, "why did you really help that night? Most people would have walked away, should have walked away." Isabel lowered the book, considering. "Because no one else did," she said finally, shrugging. "Someone had to." Something flickered in Arturo's eyes, pride, warm and unexpected, as if she'd passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. In the doorway, Leon shifted, his expression unreadable as he watched his father's genuine smile. The morning mellowed into afternoon. Arturo dozed between chapters while Isabel showed him a puzzle game on her phone, teaching him to swipe colored blocks into matching patterns. He proved surprisingly adept, his tactical mind finding combinations she'd missed. "Your turn to teach me something," Isabel said, nodding at the tarnished silver service on his side table. Arturo's eyes lit up. "Ah, proper silver care, a dying art. Fetch flour from the kitchen and white vinegar, I'll show you my mother's method." They worked together, Arturo directing as Isabel mixed the paste and applied it with gentle circular motions. The silver began to gleam under their efforts, stories flowing as naturally as the polish. Arturo's childhood in Italy, Isabel's years bouncing between foster homes. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are best," Arturo mused, watching her work. Like kindness in an alley. The peaceful rhythm of their day shattered when Leon returned as sunset bled across the sky. His presence filled the doorway like smoke, bringing shadows and silence. Isabel's gaze caught on his cuff, stark white, marred by a spray of red that couldn't be anything but blood. She flinched, instinct screaming danger, but something else made her rise. "There's lemon under the sink," she muttered, passing him a clean cloth. "It helps with stains." Their fingers brushed. Leon's hand was warm despite everything it had done that day. His eyes met hers, dark with something between surprise and warning. Later, Isabel curled in the window seat of her borrowed room, scrolling through rental listings on her phone. Everything in her price range was worse than her current studio. Roach-infested basements, converted garages, rooms with shared bathrooms down the hall. Even with Leon's payment, she couldn't afford better. The thought of that money made her skin crawl, but pride wouldn't pay bills or keep her safe from whatever storm she'd wandered into. Through the glass, she could see Leon on the balcony, cigarette smoke curling around him like confession. He stood motionless, except for the occasional flick of ash into the wind, staring at the river as if it held answers to questions she didn't dare ask. They were separated by glass and 20 feet of expensive flooring, yet the distance felt both vast and paper-thin. Their worlds had collided like tectonic plates, a violent meeting of disparate realities that changed the landscape of both. Isabel pressed her forehead to the cool window, watching Leon's cigarette paint Morse code in the dark. The day's domesticity felt surreal now. Reading adventures to a mob boss, playing phone games with a man whose enemies wanted him dead, teaching his son about lemon and bloodstains. Her finger hovered over another rental listing, a fifth-floor walk-up with bars on the windows. The price was impossible, but she kept scrolling anyway, clinging to the illusion of choice. Each listing was a reminder of the normal life she'd had just yesterday, when she was just a cashier who cleaned houses on the side, not a piece on someone else's chessboard. In his suite, Arturo's TV murmured the evening news. Guards rotated shifts in the hallway, their footsteps precise and measured. The nurse adjusted monitors with practiced efficiency. And on the balcony, Leon remained a dark sentinel against the city lights, smoke rising like signals no one would answer. Everything felt temporary and permanent at once. The borrowed clothes, the borrowed safety, the borrowed intimacy of sharing space with strangers who killed and cared with equal intensity. Isabel closed the rental app, knowing it was pointless. Whatever happened next had been set in motion the moment she picked up that mop handle in the alley, choosing to step into someone else's story without knowing the cost of the chapter she'd written. Morning light spilled across the penthouse kitchen as Isabel moved with quiet purpose, the familiar motions of cooking grounding her in this unfamiliar space. The scent of cinnamon and butter filled the air as she transformed day-old bread into something comforting. Arturo appeared first, drawn by the aroma. He settled at the kitchen island, watching her work with appreciative eyes. "My dear, you're full of surprises." "It's just cinnamon toast," Isabel said, sliding a piece toward him. "Nothing fancy. Sometimes the simplest things are the best." Arturo took a bite and closed his eyes in pleasure. "Better than any pastry chef's creation." Leon's arrival shifted the kitchen's atmosphere. He filled the doorway in an impeccably tailored suit, all sharp edges and controlled power. His gaze swept over the domestic scene before him, lingering on Isabel's borrowed sweater and bare feet. "I don't eat sugar," he stated flatly. Isabel shrugged, turning back to the stove. "More for your father, then." But when she glanced over her shoulder, Leon was reaching for a piece, his movements almost furtive. He ate without looking at her, then silently took another. Arturo's eyes crinkled with amusement as he watched his son's quiet surrender to simple pleasure. The peaceful moment shattered when Leon left for his meeting. The elevator doors had barely closed before they jerked back open. A masked figure lunged through the gap, weapon raised. "Down!" Isabel screamed, already moving. She grabbed Arturo's arm, shoving him behind an antique credenza. Her hand closed around the silver teapot they'd polished together yesterday. Heavy, solid, warm from recent use. The intruder advanced. Isabel's world narrowed to the weapon pointed at her and the weight of the teapot in her hands. She swung with everything she had, years of survival instinct behind the motion. Metal met flesh with a sickening crack. The intruder staggered, weapon wavering. Security guards poured in, taking advantage of his momentary weakness. They brought him down in a controlled rush of violence, disarming him with brutal efficiency. Leon returned to chaos, overturned furniture, guards securing the masked man. Isabel still gripping the dented teapot while helping Arturo to his feet. The temperature seemed to drop as Leon took in the scene, his rage a gathering storm. He interrogated the intruder personally, his voice so controlled it cut like ice. When the man remained silent, Leon turned that frozen fury on Isabel. "This is exactly what I feared," he bit out. "You're an unknown variable, a wild card. They never would have gotten this close if you weren't here, disrupting established security protocols." "Leon," Arturo's voice cracked through the tension like a whip. "Enough." "Father." "No." Arturo straightened, showing a flash of the power he must have wielded before age softened him. "You will not blame her for protecting me when your security failed. She is family under my roof." The word family fell into sudden silence. Guards studied the floor. Leon went absolutely still. Isabel's breath caught as the weight of that declaration settled over the room. Hours later, additional security teams swept the penthouse while technicians installed new systems. Leon moved through it all like a barely contained thunderstorm, issuing orders in clipped tones. "You'll sleep in the suite connecting to my father's room," he told Isabel, brooking no argument until further notice. The suite was larger than her entire apartment, with silk-soft sheets and a window seat overlooking the city. Isabel curled under a hand-stitched quilt, listening to Arturo's gentle snores through the wall. The familiar sound should have been comforting, but her mind raced. Who would risk so much to get at a retired old man? The answer felt obvious. They wouldn't. Not unless the real target was the son, and hurting Arturo was just the surest way to break Leon's legendary control. She traced the pattern of the quilt with one finger, remembering the flash of fear beneath Leon's anger, the way his hands had shaken slightly while checking Arturo for injuries. For all his cold fury and sharp edges, he was a son who couldn't bear to lose his father. The night deepened around her. Security teams passed her door at regular intervals, their footsteps precise and measured. Somewhere in the penthouse, Leon would be awake, probably reviewing security footage or making calls. Planning. Always planning. Arturo's snores hitched, then settled back into rhythm. Isabel closed her eyes, trying to match her breathing to that steady sound. The silver teapot sat on her nightstand, dented, but still gleaming. She'd refused to let anyone take it away, and Leon hadn't pressed the issue. The city hummed beyond the windows, cars and sirens creating urban lullabies. But Isabel remained awake, her thoughts circling like birds looking for a place to land. She was trapped in a gilded cage now. Family, by declaration, if not by blood. The word felt dangerous, a double-edged sword that both protected and bound her. In the morning, she would make cinnamon toast again. Arturo would smile, Leon would pretend not to want any, and they would all pretend this was normal. But nothing about this was normal. Not the guards, not the violence, not the way she fit so easily into their broken family dynamic. Through the wall, Arturo mumbled something in his sleep. Isabel pulled the quilt tighter, letting his peaceful breathing anchor her in the strange new reality where she was both prisoner and protector, stranger and family, all because she couldn't walk past an old man in trouble. Through morning light, Isabel watched Arturo's physical therapist guide him through gentle exercises. The guard by the door maintained his stoic presence while she learned each movement, determined to help Arturo practice between sessions. "Breathe through it," she encouraged as he winced, mirroring the therapist's professional tone. "Just 3 more." "You sound like my son," Arturo chuckled, though strain edged his voice. Always pushing for one more repetition. The morning stretched into afternoon as Isabel absorbed the penthouse's rhythms. She noted the housekeeper's schedule, the rotation of security shifts, the precise times meals arrived. Her mind cataloged everything, a habit born from years of stretching dollars and timing bus routes. Leon's periodic check-ins punctuated the day. Each time his voice carried through the intercom, she noticed how it deepened with concern for his father. The observation irritated her. She didn't want to recognize his humanity, didn't want to see past the dangerous exterior. The penthouse itself was a study in controlled luxury. Everything gleamed, but nothing felt lived in, as if the space existed purely for show. Only Arturo's suite held personal touches, dog-eared books, a worn leather chair, family photos she pretended not to study. Sunset painted the windows gold when Leon returned. His presence filled the room immediately, drawing all attention like gravity. But tonight, tension rode his shoulders harder than usual. The hospital shooter was Anton Resnick's cousin, he announced without preamble. And the man who broke in worked my South Dock. His jaw tightened. Someone sent your photo to Resnick minutes after you gave your statement. The implications settled like smoke, heavy and choking. Isabel felt the weight of suspicious stares, her skin prickling, under the scrutiny. "We need to consider all possibilities," Leon continued, his eyes cold. "Including that Resnick planted you, a convenient Good Samaritan, perfectly positioned to gain access." Heat flooded Isabel's cheeks. "You want my story? Here it is." Her voice trembled but held firm. 2 jobs, grocery store and cleaning service. 0 family since my grandmother died 3 years ago. No debts because I can't qualify for credit. My bank account has exactly $43 until payday. She lifted her chin. Check every detail. There's nothing anyone could use against me because I have nothing to lose. I helped your father because it was right. not because someone paid me. She's telling the truth, son. Arturo's quiet voice carried authority despite his weakened state. I noticed things that first night. Her shoes, good quality, but the soles are separating. She asked the nurse for a receipt for the cab voucher, wanted documentation for every penny spent. Those aren't the habits of someone working an angle. Leon's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He moved to the window, staring out at the darkening city while security teams delivered updates in low voices. The night deepened. Guards changed shifts. Arturo retired to his suite with his nurse, leaving tension hanging thick in the air. Isabel found Leon posted outside his father's door, a shadow among shadows. Steel herself, she stepped into the hallway. I won't be punished for doing one brave thing, she said, voice low but steady despite her trembling hands. I won't apologize for helping someone who needed it, even if that help complicated your world. Leon turned, moonlight catching the planes of his face. Something uncoiled in his chest. A breath, a tension, an admission he wouldn't voice. Brave people in my world, he murmured, are either carried on shoulders or buried before dawn. The words hung between them, heavy with warning and something else, respect perhaps, or understanding. Isabel refused to look away first, refused to be cowed by the truth in his statement. The night staff moved quietly through their rounds, pretending not to notice the charged tableau in the hallway. City lights sparkled beyond the windows, creating patterns on the marble floor between them. Leon's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He checked it with practiced efficiency, his expression hardening at whatever he read. Without another word, he moved past her toward his office, leaving Isabel alone with the weight of his warning. She remained in the hallway, listening to the soft beep of Arturo's heart monitor through the wall. The guard at the end of the corridor shifted position, his shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. The penthouse settled into its nighttime rhythm, air conditioning humming, security cameras whirring, the distant sound of traffic floating up from the streets below. Isabel wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold, despite the controlled temperature. She thought of her tiny apartment above the locksmith, probably collecting dust now. Her regular customers at the grocery store would wonder where she'd gone. The cleaning service would have replaced her already. A whole life disrupted because she couldn't walk past someone in trouble. But as she listened to Arturo's peaceful breathing through the door, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. Even with the danger, even with Leon's suspicion, even with her world turned upside down, she'd made the right choice that night in the rain. The security guard cleared his throat softly, a gentle reminder that she shouldn't linger in the hallway. Isabel nodded, acknowledging the unspoken instruction. She moved toward her suite, each step echoing slightly in the quiet corridor. The morning sun painted gold across the penthouse windows as Isabel absently stirred her coffee, watching the muted news feed on the kitchen TV. Traffic reports, weather updates, the usual morning monotony until the feed switched to breaking news. A helicopter view showed Leon's convoy, sleek black vehicles boxed in near the waterfront district. Her heart stopped as distant muzzle flashes lit up the screen like deadly fireflies. The camera jerked, wavered, then cut abruptly to a chipper traffic reporter discussing alternate routes. Isabel's coffee grew cold as she stood frozen, knuckles white against the counter. 23 minutes passed, each second stretching like taffy, before the elevator chimed. Leon stalked in, very much alive, but wearing violence like a second skin. Tiny shards of glass dusted his shoulders, catching light like diamond fragments. Behind him, his men dragged a struggling figure, one of Resnick's lieutenants, face bloody and hands bound. "Tell her what you told me," Leon commanded, voice arctic. The lieutenant's eyes darted to Isabel. "Your landlord, Harrow, he's been selling tenant information, said you were perfect, no family, no connections, no one to miss you if... Enough." Leon cut him off as Isabel dropped heavily onto a bar stool, the room spinning slightly, her tiny apartment above the locksmith, the careful budgeting, the pride in paying her own way, the illusion of safety she'd built brick by brick crumbled like sand. Harrow, with his monthly inspections and awkward small talk, had been sizing her up like livestock. "The situation will be handled," Leon stated, clinical precision in every word. "Security is being placed on your old building. Harrow will be dealt with. And you," he turned to Isabel, "will not leave this penthouse until I personally extract every root Resnick has planted in this city." The lieutenant was removed, leaving behind a heavy silence, broken only by the gentle hum of the air conditioning. Leon's shoulders dropped a fraction, the only sign of the morning's toll. "If they'd succeeded today," he said quietly, "my father would be dead. And you?" His jaw tightened. You'd be leverage. Or worse. Isabel wrapped her arms around herself, cold despite the morning warmth. The newsfeed continued its cheerful broadcast, oblivious to how her world had shifted again. Later, as afternoon light slanted across the penthouse floors, Leon emerged from his office carrying an old wooden box. He set it on the coffee table, the rich mahogany gleaming as he opened it to reveal carved chess pieces nestled in velvet. My father's set, he explained, carefully arranging the pieces. Time you learned. Isabel traced a finger over a knight's delicate features. Why? Because you need to understand strategy. He placed the last pawn. And I need to have one conversation with you that doesn't involve accusations or someone trying to kill us. The pieces were cool and smooth between their fingers as Leon explained each move. Isabel learned that pawns could be sacrificed, but should never be wasted. That knights were most dangerous when overlooked. That the queen was both powerful and vulnerable. Check, Leon said, after her third attempt, taking her bishop. You could have taken that 3 moves ago, Isabel observed, studying the board. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Sometimes the obvious move isn't the best one. They played in comfortable silence, the city humming beyond the windows. Isabel lost 4 games but began to see patterns, to think 3 moves ahead instead of 1. The tension that usually crackled between them eased into something almost peaceful. Your father taught you, she asked, resetting the pieces. Every Sunday after Mass. Something softened in his expression. No matter what happened during the week, we'd play for hours. Just the game, nothing else allowed to intrude. Isabel captured one of his pawns. He strikes me as a patient teacher. He is. Leon moved his knight. Though he's more ruthless than he appears, he'll let you think you're winning right until the moment he shows you exactly how thoroughly he's trapped you. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning beyond the chessboard. Isabel studied the pieces, seeing how Leon's strategy had gradually restricted her options while appearing to give ground. Like father, like son, she asked quietly. His eyes met hers across the board. I prefer a more direct approach. Check. The game continued as shadows lengthened across the floor. Security teams rotated shifts. Somewhere in the city, Harrow was learning the cost of his betrayal. But here, in this moment, there was only the quiet click of pieces against the board and the gradual discovery that they could exist in the same space without sparking fires. Arturo's nurse paused in the doorway, smiling at the sight of them bent over the chess set. His fever's down, she reported. He's asking for dinner. We should pause here, Leon said, studying the board one last time. Isabel nodded, helping him carefully return each piece to its velvet nest. Their fingers brushed as they closed the box, and for once, neither of them flinched away. The evening settled around them like a heavy curtain, full of unspoken things. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new calculations, new moves in a game far deadlier than chess. But for now there was just the smooth wood of the box under their hands, and the strange peace of a battle fought only on 64 squares. Morning light crept through the penthouse windows, painting golden paths across polished floors. Isabel found Arturo already awake in his sitting room, propped up against embroidered pillows and looking sharper than he had in days. The usual morning fog had lifted from his eyes, replaced by something heavier, remembrance. Come sit with me, dear, he said, patting the chair beside his bed. There's something I need to tell you. Isabel settled into the plush chair, noting how his hands twisted the silk blanket, a nervous gesture she hadn't seen before. You wonder about Leon, Arturo began, his voice soft but clear. Why he carries himself like Atlas, bearing the weight of worlds. He paused, pain flickering across his features. That's my doing. What do you mean? 15 years ago, there was an ambush. Leon's mother, my Maria. His voice caught. She was killed. I was destroyed. And in my grief, I did something unforgivable. I pushed Leon into command. He was barely more than a boy. Isabel's throat tightened as she watched tears gather in Arturo's eyes. I told myself he was ready, that he was strong enough. But the truth? Arturo's laugh was bitter. I was weak. I couldn't face our world without Maria, so I made my son do it instead. And that's when he changed? Changed? Arturo shook his head. No, my dear. That's when he hardened. Like watching steel being forged, necessary perhaps, but painful to witness. The armor that keeps him alive is the same armor that keeps him alone. Isabel let the silence settle before asking quietly, "What frightens you more, Arturo? Resnick's bullets or seeing Leon spend his life in isolation?" Arturo's smile was sad and knowing. "Ah, there's that perception of yours." He reached for her hand. "Would you make that cinnamon toast again? The way you did yesterday? It tastes like mornings before grief found us." She squeezed his hand and went to the kitchen, measuring cinnamon and sugar with care. The familiar motions of cooking brought a temporary peace to her churning thoughts. Leon appeared in the doorway as she was pulling the toast from the oven, his hair sleep-mussed, wearing a soft gray t-shirt that made him look almost ordinary. For a moment, watching him accept a piece of toast with a quiet, "Thank you," Isabel could almost pretend this was normal, just breakfast with family on a sunny morning. The illusion of peace shattered that afternoon. A package arrived, plain brown paper wrapped around a small box, addressed to Isabel in typed letters. Inside lay a phone, screen already lit with an incoming call. Leon moved to intercept, but Isabel had already answered. A photo filled the screen, her studio apartment door kicked in, splintered wood scattered across familiar floorboards. Text scrolled across the image. "Meet alone or the building burns. All those families. All that collateral damage." Leon plucked the phone from her trembling fingers. His voice was winter itself as he spoke. "You won't touch what's mine." The phone crumbled in his grip, pieces scattering across marble floors. Isabel stared at the broken components, her mind racing through faces. The elderly couple below her, the single mom with twins on the second floor, the Nigerian family who always shared their cooking. "They're innocent," she whispered. "They're protected," Leon countered, already typing rapid instructions into his own phone. "I have men there now." The day stretched endless, tension coiling tighter with each passing hour. Isabel paced, tried to read, attempted another chess game but couldn't focus. Night fell like a heavy curtain, bringing no relief. Sleep, when it came, was filled with flames. Isabel jolted awake to find Leon's silhouette in her doorway, solid and watchful. "The building's secure," he said quietly. "For now. We move at dawn." She nodded, words unnecessary. He lingered a moment longer before disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. The rest of the night stretched between them like the river below, dark, restless, full of hidden currents. In separate rooms, they listened to water rushing past the foundation of the building, each lost in private thoughts, but bound by the same flow of time, the same impossible situation. Isabel lay awake, counting heartbeats, thinking of Arturo's confession and Leon's transformation, of choices made in grief and prices paid in solitude. Somewhere else in the penthouse, Leon stood at his window, watching the city lights reflect off the river's surface, his father's words about armor and isolation echoing in rooms he'd kept locked for years. The night air hummed with anticipation, with changes hovering just beyond reach. Tomorrow would bring movement, decisions, perhaps even dangers. But for now, there was only the river's song, the soft whir of security cameras, and two people learning that sometimes the heaviest walls are the ones we build ourselves. Through the wall, Isabel could hear Arturo's gentle snoring, the only one finding peace in the pre-dawn hours. She thought about the cinnamon toast, such a simple thing bringing such profound memory to the surface, about how grief shapes people like river water shapes stone. Gradually, relentlessly, until the original form is barely recognizable. The city's distant pulse provided a backdrop to their vigil. Sirens, late-night traffic, the occasional boat horn from the river. Security teams moved in silent patterns through the penthouse, their footsteps barely audible on thick carpets. Life continued its flow around them, even as they remained suspended in this moment before dawn, before whatever tomorrow would bring. The safe house hummed with tension. Maps and surveillance photos plastered the walls of the war room, a spider's web of red strings connecting faces to locations. Leon stood at the center, his shoulders rigid as he traced paths across a city grid. Isabel hugged her arms around herself, taking in the organized chaos. Arturo dozed in an armchair nearby, looking small against the leather. Armed men moved with practiced efficiency, setting up communications equipment and checking security feeds. "Resnick wants a show!" Leon's voice cut through the quiet. Public execution, maximum humiliation. His finger jabbed at a photograph. "He thinks if he can take down Arturo in broad daylight, our people will see weakness. Territory becomes negotiable." Isabel stepped closer to the wall of evidence, drawn to a familiar stone facade. "I know that place. The Riverside Chapel on McKinley. She moved forward, squinting. I clean it on Tuesdays. Leon's head snapped toward her. What do you know about it? The back gate. She gestured at the metal entrance in the photo. It sticks unless you lift it first, then push. The groundskeeper never fixed it properly. The room stilled. Leon's eyes narrowed as he grabbed a topographical map, tracing a new route with his finger. If we could get through here. He turned to his lieutenant. The whole eastern approach opens up. They wouldn't expect it. His gaze found Isabel again, different this time, assessing, appreciative. The weight of his attention made her pulse jump. Stay close, he ordered, leading her to the command suite. I need to know everything about that building. The suite was smaller than the war room, dominated by encrypted phones and laptop screens. Leon settled into a chair, motioning for her to take the one beside him. Between rapid-fire calls in multiple languages and orders given in that low, dangerous rasp, he turned to her with unexpected questions. Where did you grow up? Foster homes, she answered, startled by his interest. Moved around a lot. More calls, more orders, then first job, 14, diner dishwasher under the table. His eyes flickered to her hands as if imagining them younger, raw from hot water and cheap soap. Another call, another command to his men. What scares you most? The question hung between them. Isabel met his gaze, struck by how the artificial light caught the amber in his eyes. Being powerless, she admitted, having no control over what happens to me. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. The air grew thick with words unsaid. Twilight painted the windows purple when the operation launched. Arturo was moved in an armored car, a decoy convoy drawing Resnick's attention while the real transport slipped through the chapel's trick gate. Victory seemed within reach. Leon's phone lit up with confirmation of the decoy route being hit exactly as planned. But then, Sir! A lieutenant burst in, tablet extended. Security footage from the hospital, the night of the incident. The screen showed grainy images of Isabel talking to a nurse. The same nurse, now reported missing. The temperature in the room plummeted as suspicious eyes turned her way. She could have been placed, someone muttered. Long game. The timing is too perfect, another added. Leon's jaw clenched, tension radiating from every line of his body. When he spoke, his voice was stripped of the warmth it had held hours before. Take her to the secure room. No windows, no contact until we verify everything. Rough hands gripped Isabel's arms. She caught one last glimpse of Leon's face, conflict written in the furrow of his brow, before being marched away. The room was bare except for a bed and bathroom. Isabel paced the perimeter, 7 steps by 5, her mind racing. Every interaction from the past week played on loop. The alley, the hospital, the penthouse. The quiet moments with Arturo. The chess games with Leon. The way he'd looked at her today. Before suspicion poisoned everything. Her own words echoed back. Being powerless, having no control. Hours crawled by. She counted ceiling tiles, tracked the guard's footsteps outside, replayed every second of that hospital conversation. The nurse had seemed normal, tired, rushed, but normal. Had there been signs? Some hint of deception she'd missed? The lock clicked with mechanical precision every hour as guards checked in. Each time, Isabel's heart leaped, hoping for answers, for Leon, for anything except this suffocating uncertainty. She thought of Arturo in his armchair, of the pride in his eyes when she'd stood up to Leon, of Leon himself, asking about her childhood, as if her answers mattered, as if she mattered. The night stretched endless. No windows meant no sense of time passing, just the artificial buzz of fluorescent lights and the pound of her heart marking seconds like a metronome. Outside, she knew decisions were being made. Proof was being gathered or manufactured. Her fate balanced on the edge of other people's choices. Being powerless. The words tasted bitter now. She'd spent her whole life fighting against exactly this, being at the mercy of others' decisions. Foster parents, social workers, landlords, bosses. Now crime lords and missing nurses and men who thought nothing of using an ordinary woman as a pawn in their power games. The room seemed to shrink with each passing hour, the walls pressing in with questions she couldn't answer. Somewhere in this building, Leon was either proving her innocence or her guilt. Somewhere Arturo was safe in a new location, perhaps worried about her, perhaps wondering if he'd been wrong to trust her. And here she was, caught in the middle, with nothing to do but pace and wait and remember the way Leon's voice had softened when he asked about her fears, before suspicion hardened it again. Morning light crept under the door, bleached and sickly. The lock clicked and Leon entered, a manila folder in his hand. His face was carved from stone, but something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or resignation. Explain this. He laid out documents on the small table. Bank statements showed the missing nurse's account suddenly flush with cash. Phone records revealed calls to Isabel's number in the days before the alley incident. Isabel's stomach dropped. Those aren't real. I can't gamble my father's life on hope. Leon's voice was raw, like each word scraped his throat. On wanting to believe you. The wanting hung between them, heavy with things unsaid. Isabel stood straighter, refusing to shrink. I won't beg, but I'll give you truth instead. She laid out details like breadcrumbs, each one precise and personal. The lemon you used to clean blood. It's under the kitchen sink, left side. Arturo taught me to polish the silver teapot with flour and vinegar the day before the intruder came. My landlord's calls to Resnick were time-stamped before I even left the ER. Check the hospital records. Leon's jaw tightened with each word. She pressed on, desperate now. The intruder, who came for Arturo, he favored his left leg, lifted it first, like someone who's worked the docks with an old injury. Would I know that if I was planted? Would I notice things like that if I was paid to play a part? Silence stretched between them. Leon's hands flexed at his sides, and Isabel recognized the gesture now, his tell when emotions threatened his control. The evidence, he started, is forged, she cut in. You know it is. Deep down, you know. His silence was worse than rage. It spoke of duty warring with instinct, of a man trained to trust nothing but forced to question everything. The hours that followed were endless. Isabel sat on the narrow bed, counting breaths, while guards rotated outside her door. The camera in the corner blinked red, watching, recording. Then chaos erupted in the hallway. Rushed footsteps, urgent voices. The door flew open, and a guard appeared. Sir, it's your father! Leon's face drained of color. He moved to leave, then hesitated, looking back at Isabel. The choice carved lines of agony across his features. Stay and guard a potential threat, or go to his father's side. Keep her secured, he ordered, voice tight. No one in or out. The door locked with finality. Isabel pressed her ear against it, straining to hear. Fragments filtered through. Chest pain and ambulance and critical. Minutes crawled by like hours. The small room seemed to shrink, walls pressing in. The camera's red eye watched, unblinking. Then the screen mounted in the corner flickered to life. Isabel's breath caught. The feed showed Arturo on a gurney, oxygen mask clouding with each labored breath. Text scrolled across the bottom. Next time, it's a body bag. Unless. The message continued, laying out terms. Leon would hand over both Isabel and his father, or Resnick, would ensure neither survived the night. Isabel sank to the floor, knees weak. This was her fault. If she hadn't helped that night in the alley, if she'd just walked away. But she couldn't have. That wasn't who she was. And now that same instinct that made her step in to help was screaming that something wasn't right. The evidence was too perfect, the timing too convenient. Hours passed in suspended animation. Guards changed shifts. The camera blinked. Isabel paced, 7 steps by 5, mind racing. She thought of Leon's face when he'd asked about her fears, the way his hands had moved chess pieces with careful precision, how he'd looked at her this morning like cutting her out would cost him something vital. A guard brought food she couldn't eat. Water she barely sipped. The light outside the high window faded from white to gold to purple. Finally, movement in the hallway. Words filtered through. Midnight meeting and riverside warehouses and agreed to terms. Isabel pressed her forehead against the cool wall. Leon had made his choice, a terrible bargain to protect what mattered most. She couldn't blame him. Family was everything in his world, and she was nothing, just a girl who'd stepped into an alley at the wrong moment. But she remembered how he'd looked at her, like she wasn't invisible, like she mattered. The night deepened outside her windowless room. Somewhere across the city, Leon was preparing to meet Resnick, to trade her life for his father's safety, to cut out the uncertainty she represented, even if it cost him something he couldn't name. Isabel sat on the bed, hands clasped tight, and prayed. Not for herself. She'd survived being nothing before. She could do it again. She prayed for Arturo's heart to keep beating, for Leon to see through whatever trap was being laid, for the truth to emerge before midnight struck and choices became permanent. The camera blinked its steady red rhythm, watching her pray in the dark. Outside, the city hummed with night traffic and distant sirens. Inside, Isabel waited, remembering the way Leon's voice had softened when he asked her questions, the way his eyes had warmed when she made his father laugh, the way he'd looked at her like she was something worth seeing. She prayed she hadn't already lost that, the first man who'd ever truly seen her. Thunder growled across the waterfront as Leon stepped from his car, the tails of his black coat snapping in the wind. Rain glinted off warehouse metal, transforming the industrial wasteland into something both beautiful and deadly, like the man himself. His footsteps echoed through puddles as he approached the meeting point, one hand holding a phone, streaming live footage of Arturo's hospital room. The old man slept peacefully, watched over by Leon's most trusted guards. The image steadied Leon's rage into something cold and precise. Lightning split the sky as Anton Resnick emerged from the shadows, dragging the missing nurse by her arm. Her mascara had run in dark tracks down her cheeks, but the fear in her eyes looked rehearsed, a performance for payment. Beautiful night for endings, wouldn't you say? Resnick's smile was razor sharp. I trust you've come to reasonable terms about our arrangement. Reasonable. Leon's voice was winter itself, like bribing a nurse to frame an innocent woman. Money buys any story you need in this city. Resnick shrugged. Your little savior had such a convenient background. No family, no connections. Who would miss her? Leon's jaw tightened, but his expression remained dead calm. You should have done better research. He pulled out a second phone, hitting play on a video his tech team had uncovered during the day. The grainy footage showed the nurse meeting Isabel's landlord in a back alley. Cash and a burner phone changed hands, and when the landlord reached up to count bills, his sleeve rode up to reveal Resnick's signature tattoo. Amateur work, Leon said softly. Sloppy, and you made one critical mistake. His eyes went predatory. You tried to frame someone under my protection. Resnick's smug facade cracked. The nurse tried to bolt, but he yanked her back as a human shield. Thunder crashed overhead as men melted from the shadows on both sides. Gunfire erupted in strobing flashes, turning raindrops to crystal in the sudden light. Leon moved with lethal grace, each shot precise, each step calculated. He was every inch the weapon his life had forged him to be. One of Resnick's men grabbed the nurse, pressing a gun to her temple. Back off or she dies! But before Leon could move, a side door burst open. Isabel charged in, rain-soaked and fierce. She'd picked the lock after taking down a guard in the hallway, refusing to be a passive piece in someone else's game. Her sudden appearance created just enough chaos. She slammed into the gunman's arm, knocking his aim wide. The shot went wild, and Leon used that split second to put a bullet through the man's shoulder. The fight ended as suddenly as it began. Resnick knelt in a puddle, hands bound behind his back with his own belt. Blood mixed with rain, washing away in crimson rivers. Leon dragged Resnick into the open, letting the storm soak them both. His voice carried clearly despite the thunder. Remember this moment! Anyone who touches my father or my woman will be destroyed. Not just killed, ruined. Root and branch until nothing remains but a cautionary tale. Resnick spat blood. You've gone soft, Viscari, protecting street trash, and Leon's backhand cracked across his face. That street trash showed more loyalty in one night than you have in a lifetime. She's worth 1,000 of you. Blue and red lights began to pulse in the distance, emergency vehicles responding to gunfire reports. Leon turned to where Isabel stood trembling in the rain, her clothes plastered to her skin, her eyes huge with adrenaline and something deeper. Their gazes locked. Everything else fell away. The wailing sirens, the groaning wounded, the thunder still rolling overhead. In that moment, they saw each other clearly for the first time. His eyes held promises, both savage and tender, protection and possession, devotion and desire. Hers offered understanding and acceptance of both the monster and the man. The nurse huddled against a wall, babbling about immunity deals. Resnick's men were being zip-tied by Leon's security team. Rain hammered the warehouse roof in sheets of silver, but Leon and Isabel remained frozen in their own world. She'd risked everything to help him. He'd burned down an empire to protect her. The truth of their connection crackled between them like lightning. Powerful, dangerous, impossible to deny. His men waited for orders, guns still trained on the prisoners. The sirens grew closer. Soon this warehouse would be chaos of badges and statements and damage control. But for these few heartbeats, nothing existed except the way they looked at each other through the rain. Isabel took a shaky breath, pushing wet hair from her face. Despite everything, her chin lifted with that quiet defiance that had first caught his attention. Leon's expression softened fractionally, a subtle shift only she would recognize. The storm raged on, but they had found their eye of calm within it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The broke girl with an unshakable moral compass, and the dangerous man who'd discovered his humanity in her courage. The rain washed away old lies and pain, leaving only this truth. They had chosen each other, against all odds and sense. Thunder crashed overhead one final time as emergency lights painted the warehouse walls in urgent crimson and cobalt. The night wasn't over yet, but its darkest moments had passed in gunfire and revelation. What remained was the understanding that had bloomed between them, as fierce as a storm, as undeniable as dawn. Morning light spilled through the penthouse windows as Leon guided Isabel inside, his hand steady at the small of her back. The city below stirred to life, oblivious to the night's violence that had reshaped their world. Water still dripped from their clothes, leaving dark trails on the marble floor. In the living room, Arturo reclined on the sofa, wrapped in a cashmere throw. His face was pale, but his eyes sparkled with life. The private nurse hovered nearby, checking monitors with professional detachment. "Ah, there you are," Arturo said, his voice warm despite its weakness. "I believe I was promised cinnamon toast at some point." His gaze fell meaningfully on Isabel. She managed a shaky smile, grateful for the familiar request. "I'll start it right away." "And perhaps you could find us a deck of cards?" Arturo called after her retreating form. "But first, Leon, a moment alone with my son." Leon's jaw tightened, but he nodded. The nurse discreetly withdrew, leaving father and son in privacy. Arturo's expression grew serious as he gestured for Leon to sit. "I saw the security feed," he said without preamble. "I watched Isabel slip past the guards to follow you to that warehouse." He held up a hand when Leon started to speak. "Before you rage about her disobedience or recklessness, consider what it means that she chose to be there, that she refused to stay safely locked away while you were in danger." Leon's hands clenched. "She could have been killed." "Yes," Arturo agreed. "Just as you could have been. But she understood the risk and made her choice anyway. That's not weakness, my son. That's a different kind of strength than the one you know." Understanding dawned slowly across Leon's features as his father continued. "If you want a queen beside you, not a prisoner, not a protected pet, but a true partner, you must learn to trust strength that looks different than your own. She won't be contained by locks and guards. Her power lies in choosing to stay, despite being free to leave." From the kitchen came the homey sounds of butter sizzling, cinnamon and sugar being measured. The familiar ritual felt surreal after the night's chaos. "She deserves better than our world," Leon said quietly. "Perhaps," Arturo replied, "but she's chosen it, chosen you, knowing exactly what it means. Don't dishonor that choice by doubting it." When Leon entered the kitchen minutes later, he found Isabel methodically packing her few possessions into a worn canvas tote. Her hands trembled slightly, but her movements were determined. She'd changed into dry clothes, simple leggings and an oversized sweater that made her look impossibly young and vulnerable. She glanced up at his approach, chin lifting in that familiar defiant tilt. "I should go," she said softly. "If freedom's the only kind of love I can afford right now, I need to take it before—" "Stop." Leon's voice was rough. He crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, hands coming up to frame her face. "I don't want you free of me. I want you safe with me. There's a difference." Her breath caught as he continued, each word deliberate and weighted with promise. "I want to protect not just you, but everything you care about. Your old building, every tenant gets better security, repairs, real leases. That bastard landlord, he'll face charges for every law he broke. The community college you researched at 2 a.m. when you thought I was sleeping, there will be scholarships in your name." Tears spilled over onto her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "Why?" "Because your courage shouldn't be a liability. It should be an anchor. For me, for this family, for everyone you want to help." His thumbs brushed away her tears. "Stay. Build something with me. Make this world better in your way while I protect it in mine." Isabel drew a shaky breath. "On one condition." "Name it." "No more locked doors. Not against me, ever." Her voice strengthened. "I choose to stay, but I won't be caged, even in a gilded one." Leon's response was to walk to the balcony doors. He threw them wide, letting in the morning air and the river's distant song. "You're mine forever," he said simply, "and I'll earn every yes that follows." The day settled into something resembling normal, though normal had shifted on its axis. The nurse checked Arturo's vitals one final time before declaring him stable enough to rest in his own bed. Isabel made fresh toast when the first batch went cold. Leon's phone buzzed occasionally with updates from his men handling the warehouse aftermath, but for once, he let the messages wait. As evening approached, they gathered around the dining table. Not the formal one in the main room, but the smaller one in the kitchen, where Isabel had first made breakfast days ago. Arturo dealt cards with careful precision, his color much improved. The playing cards snapped against the wood with a sound like possibility. Leon's gun rested on the credenza behind them, present but not needed, like the power it represented. Under the table, Isabel's hand found his, their fingers intertwining with quiet certainty. Through the windows, storm clouds that had dominated the sky for days finally broke apart, revealing a scatter of emerging stars. They played cards and shared a simple meal, and if anyone found it strange to see Manhattan's most dangerous man laughing at his father's stories while a former grocery clerk corrected his card-counting technique, they kept it to themselves. This was their new normal, built choice by choice, moment by moment, no longer navigating darkness alone.